thank you all for being here on a Friday afternoon. I apologize about the heat. It is warm in this room, so we'll just sweat together. And I will keep fanning myself so I don't pass out in front of you. My name is Amy Siracusano. This is my 20th year in public education. I started as a teacher assistant in a school district on Long Island, and then became a classroom teacher on Long Island before moving to Maryland, where I held various positions such as learning specialist, vice principal, IEP chairperson, dean, and currently the literacy integration specialist for 12 elementary schools and a public day school, pre-K to 5. So I work with almost 400 teachers who send me emails every single day asking me to come in and either work with groups of students who are struggling in reading or come in and teach a lesson that they may not know how to do or need help with. So I am a teacher at heart. Instruction is at the core of everything I do, and I never stop learning. The day I stop learning is the day that I'm going to retire to an island somewhere by myself. I do have 2 children in elementary school and a husband at home, so he's holding down the fort this week while I'm away. One of the things that I hold near and dear to my heart as well is just knowing that many years ago I was trained in reciprocal teaching, for many of you that might know that method of comprehension. And one of the premises for that is that good readers know when they don't know. Well, I believe that great teachers know when they don't know, and then they ask questions. So I don't have the answers to everything, but I know when I don't know, and I know people who know more than me, and I ask them those questions. So I think that's really, really important as an educator. And I'm going to bring you on a journey with me of my story and how I became more diagnostic and prescriptive in my teaching, focusing on foundational reading. And so any good story begins with a dedication page, right? And so this presentation is dedicated to the work that Maria Murray and her group are doing here today and throughout the year in upstate New York. I just think it's wonderful. And also to 2 of my mentors, one who's here today, who just presented, so you may hear some overlapping information, Michael Hunter, and his business partner, Linda Farrell. Without them, I would not be the teacher that I am today. So before we get started here. Okay, so these are our objectives, and if you didn't get a handout or you're missing handouts, you just email me. That's my email there, and it will be posted. But if there are additional handouts that you didn't get, just email me. I'll send them to you via email as soon as I can. Okay, I did print 115 copies. And I don't know how many people are in here. So these are our objectives. I'm not going to go through them, but they are there in the PowerPoint for you. So this begins with my story. And I am going to hold my notes in my hand for a variety of reasons, but this is just me. So to get started, I want to frame our thinking today. And for those of you that were just in Michael's session, you may have seen this. This is what Readsters, their company, has developed. And they call it the Beginning Reading Skills Map. You have a colored copy of this in your handout packet for those of you that were able to get that. So the focus of our work here today is really going to be up here in this pre-reading area. So it's divided into 2 categories. We have the phonological side, which holds sounds, right? So we start with at syllable level, onset rhyme going into individual phonemes, individual speech sounds, and then moving over here onto the orthographic side for kids to know their letter names, letter sounds, and some basic irregular sight words or high-frequency words, whatever you call them. And I'm going to be talking about a student who came to us who was struggling down here and how we needed to diagnose and prescribe instruction moving back a little bit to this foundation. So I want you to think about this as like a house. And if any of these building blocks are weak, the whole structure of the house is weak. So that's how I want you to kind of think of this. So this presentation begins with a student who came to me in 1st grade. I was a Title I teacher at the time at a Title I building. The principal came to me with Brandon's data. He had just moved to us in the middle of 1st grade, and they had given him a Dibbles assessment, and she was in panic. So he appeared to be doing okay with phonemic awareness based on his scores on the screener, Dibbles screener. Remember, Dibbles is a screener, so all it does is kind of give you a temperature. So if you go to the doctor and you have a fever, you say, I'm sick, but I don't know what I have. So we didn't know whether he had strep throat or he had an ear infection. We didn't know what was going on with Brandon, right? And when we looked at his nonsense word fluency, he was well below benchmarks. We had some concern there. But the thing that was most alarming for Brandon is that he was only able to read 1 word correctly out of 7 in a minute with 14% accuracy. So that was really alarming. The only word that he read correctly was the word the, or the, okay? So she asked me for help. Well, I had just finished becoming a letters trainer for the state of Maryland. And I knew there was a problem, and I knew it was probably something to do with letter names and letter sounds and syllables, but I didn't know how to diagnose that. I didn't have an assessment. So I called Carol Tolman, who was my trainer, and she said, you know, there's 2 people in your area that could probably help you. I'm swamped, I'm traveling. You know, why don't you contact them? And so I did. I contacted Linda and Michael. And so we started a track to assessment, to diagnosing and prescribing what Brandon needed. So Brandon is in the middle of 1st grade, and if we look at our skills map, he should have been finishing up the first purple box at the bottom on the left and moving into the 2nd box. So he should be, at this point in the year, able to read simple syllable, 1-syllable CVC words, right? Well, he was nowhere near that. So Linda recommended that I give what's called the beginning decoding assessment. And you will know how to get all of these, and this is absolutely free on the Really Great Reading website. It will always be free. It's version A. There are 2 versions, but we gave the beginning. There's also an advanced version, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Let's take a look at what Brandon did when I gave this to him. Before we do that, I just want to go through what the assessment actually looks like. So it is made up of 5 irregularly spelled high-frequency words, 5 real words with short vowels and 3 letters. Then we have digraphs, blends, 22 1-syllable words in sentences with some irregularly spelled sight words. Then we go into some nonsense words with short vowels and nonsense words with digraphs. Okay? So this is what happened when I tested Brandon. So you can see here that Brandon was able to read C and U. He didn't even attempt the word one. He read they as the, and, oops, sorry, that went fast. So he had 3 errors, read 2 words correctly. Then the next section is the single syllable words with short vowels. So he read rag as sound by sound. He read lid as lit. He read dot as dude. Hum was correct, must have been a sight word for him, and bet as beat. So you can see here we have some short vowel errors, and we have some confusions for the letters T and D, right? So already I'm alarmed, right? I'm alarmed already from the screener, but now I'm really alarmed because this is supposed to pinpoint my instruction. So when we look at digraphs, we can see that he wasn't able to read anything correctly, right? He got shh on shop, but couldn't go any further. He's missing some vowels again, so he's got confusions all over the place. All right, can you all see that? All right. And then we gave him the blend section, so he read dust as dust, step as stup, that's another short vowel error, pond as pot, so now he's leaving out sounds in blends as he's reading, and he's changing the final sound, and that G is missing there, but brag as bag. So again, he's leaving out sounds on blends. So what does this mean for Brandon in terms of instruction, right? Well, he's got some letter confusions at the end of words. He's got confusion with short vowels. Digraphs and blends are very difficult for him. He's not quite sure what to do with them when he's reading, and sight words are troubling. He read 22 out of 50 words correct. Now, at the middle of 1st grade, this score should be 36 out of 50. This assessment is just assessing, if you look in that first box on that skills map, right? Those simple CVC words with a little smattering of the high-frequency words in the pink box, right? So Brandon is well below where he needs to be. I'm just going to fast forward here for a second. By the end of 1st grade, he is supposed to be able to read 48 out of 50 on this assessment. And this diagnostic assessment helps us to find out where kids are struggling. So at this point, I know that Brandon is struggling all over the place, right? And it's alarming because now it's January in 1st grade. So time is ticking, and we need to do something for him. So we needed to dig a little bit deeper. We needed to find out where in the pre-reading, so if you look at your skills map again, where in that green box and that blue box, where is he missing skills? Because he obviously can't do the things in the purple box, right? He can't do things on the decoding side. So we administered an assessment that is also free, and you can download it at readsters.com. And this is in the slides, so you'll know how to find this at the end. And it is called the PreReading Probe. And this assessment tests these skills. It tests letter names and letter sounds on the orthographic side. And it assesses on the phonological side syllable awareness, onset rhyme, phonemes, in terms of being able to blend and segment individual sounds in single syllable words and be able to manipulate or chain those sounds, right? And we see that in Dr. Kilpatrick's past assessment, where they take sounds out, put them in very rapidly without thinking about it. So this is how Brandon did on the assessment. He only knows 24 out of 26 letter names. Now, you give me a text that is missing those 2 letters, and I'll tell you Brandon can read. And here's my problem with this, and I'm just going to digress for one moment. I was an IEP chairperson for a year, worked with many special education teachers. And many of the IEPs that came into me would say, student will master 80% of their letter names and letter sounds. No. They have to master 100%, right? We're laughing, but is that right? You tell me which 80% of the letters in the alphabet you don't need to know to access text as you grow older, right? And they use that goal over and over through the years. Now that 80%, you guys, came from comprehension. But we seem to use that 80% goals on IEPs for everything. It happened in math too. I know we're not talking about math, but guess what? Recognizing numbers in print, you need to know all of them. You don't have to know 80% of the numbers, because if you're doing your checkbook and you don't know a number, guess what? Right? You're monetarily illiterate, so we have a problem there with this. Okay, so not only that, but Brandon didn't know his letter sounds. He only knew 23 out of 32, and we're going to take a look at what this really looks like for him. And then when we look at phonological readiness, we can see that he couldn't blend and segment 4 sounds. He could do it in 3 sounds, and he had major difficulty when it came to manipulating sounds and words. So he confused the letter J and S. He didn't know them. He gave them different names. Sounds, he had BD, so he read the letter B as D. For X, he said S. That's a problem. Short vowels, he read the short E as a long E sound. So that's good. We know he knows long E, but that's not what we wanted in this. And he didn't know any of the digraphs. So do you see how that correlates now to what he was able to do in decoding? He didn't know them in isolation. So how is he going to put them together when we have other letters attached to him? So he is just completely overwhelmed. And then we can see here what he did with blending phonemes and segmenting phonemes. So he really wasn't able to hold on to anything other than the first sound in the first 2 words, from toast to toe and spoon to spoo, sorry. And then thrill, he got the final sound, set of sounds. And then what he would do when he was trying to segment things, he just kept them together. He really wasn't able to segment the sounds and pull them apart. And then we can see here, he only has 50% of his ability to manipulate sounds. So from rock to rod, or knock to rock, he wasn't able to do that quickly and rapidly. That kind of super mastery that we want kids that struggle with reading to have. We want them to have super mastery of these skills, so they're very automatic and fluent, very quick. So we needed to design some instruction around this data. We took this data to be diagnostic in our work and redesigned his program, what he was getting in the classroom. So we concentrated first on the letter confusions that he had, and we worked on blending and segmenting sounds in spoken words. We went back to 2 sounds because that was something that he was good at, and we want him to build on something he knows to then get him to the more difficult. But again, ensuring that this is at the super mastery level, that it's very easy for him to do. Whoever put the air on, I thank you, because it's much cooler in here. We wanted him to identify and label vowel sounds in spoken words. So if I gave him a word like cat, could he say the vowel sound is a? What do we call it? Short A. If I said Kate, what's the vowel sound? A. What do we call it? Long A. I want him to know those pieces. And I want him to know it when I'm doing it orally without letters attached. This is all phonological based. And I want him to be able to manipulate sounds and words just like you would see in Dr. Kilpatrick's past assessment and in the tools that he has in that book for saying splat without ooh, it's spat, and doing it very, very quickly without him having to think about it. And then we want him to know these basic 10 high-frequency words so that he can access text. These words are the most common high-frequency words that we see in text. A basic sentence will have a majority of these words in it, right? And remember, he's in the middle of first grade. So what happened to Brandon when we changed his instruction? So in first grade, remember, so we're going through the end of first grade, he was able to master pre-reading skills during in-class intervention. He was not pulled out. He would happen to be in a co-taught classroom, so the special ed teacher was in there for a period of time, or we had a para in there, and they were able to move the kids through rotations. He was also exposed to whole class phonics through a program called Foundations, which is written by Barbara Wilson. And Foundations is a great program, but for Brandon, it didn't have enough of the phonological awareness tools that he needed. So he needed something in addition to Foundations. Foundations is great for the phonics, and it's very systematic and explicit, but he needed something in addition to that on the phonology side. In second grade, he mastered beginning phonics because he entered Title I, and he got an additional service. We used Phonics plugin, which is actually outside. We used it when it was in draft form, so it wasn't quite written. We were kind of the guinea pigs. Brandon was one of our guinea pigs for that. Not that we were experimenting on him, but we were going through the lessons. Let me just say that, because I heard that over and over again today. We were not experimenting. It was a very systematic, explicit approach to phonics, multisensory approach, but we were just going through the lessons with him. And then we used decodable text to practice those skills in isolation. So after he learned a pattern, he would then practice it in connected text through a decodable text. Very important for Brandon because everybody else in second grade is accessing other kinds of text. Brandon needs to feel like he's a reader as well. The last thing I want for a struggling reader is to feel like they can't do something with reading, right? So we wanted to give that to him so he felt successful with that. And in third grade, he didn't qualify for Title I, and he was well on his way to mastering advanced phonics, with the classroom teacher continuing with another level of decodable text based on the patterns that she was teaching within the classroom. So this was a real success story, right? Because for Brandon, we kept him, not that I have anything against special education, but it wasn't that Brandon needed specialized instruction. Brandon needed a different course of instruction within the classroom, right? He needed the teacher to be trained to know how to teach him systematically and explicitly from where he was missing skills, building those building blocks along the way, and getting him to be a successful reader. And that was really important. So I just want to show you some other data on Brandon. So here he was in first grade. That was his score on the beginning decoding survey there. Sorry, I'm pointing. I should be using this. And then in third grade, you can see 61 words per minute. So now he's just, remember, this is just a screener, but we want to collect this data. 95% accuracy. That's huge. Now when Brandon's reading, he can actually make meaning from what he's reading. He can actually comprehend it. He's got a 49 out of 50 at the beginning of third grade on that, and now on the second version of the decoding survey, which is also free at reallygreatreading.com, the advanced decoding survey, he had a 20. The passing score for that is 26 out of 30 by the end of fourth grade. Brandon is well on his way to being a successful reader, and I'll tell you, he just graduated high school, and he's doing great, right? So, yeah. And I thank the teachers that worked with us on this. Very exciting. The thing about this is we focused on accuracy before rate. Prior to knowing any of this, I'm going to tell you what my Title I team did. We stuck everybody in Great Leaps. Does anybody know Great Leaps? Now, what's Great Leaps for? Fluency, reading passages. So we would have stuck more passages in front of Brandon and just let him read, right? And he would have seen the colors over and over with the same passage 800 million times until he got through it, because he probably memorized it at that point, right? Horrible instruction. But I knew I didn't know what to do for him, and we changed some things. And everybody in that Title I building, everybody in that school changed some things for not only Brandon, but every Brandon that would come our way next. And when you focus on accuracy, the rate will come, right? We can see that he dipped a little bit between first and second grade, and I'm going to attribute that to between second and third grade, he attended Title I summer school. So for 4 weeks, for 4 days a week, he got 2 hours of reading intervention, decodable text, read-alouds. He was exposed to print during those 4 weeks. So I'm going to attribute the fact that he didn't have any regression here to that extra additional support during the summer for Brandon. He didn't have a lot of support at home to be reading on his own, didn't have a lot of access to text. Okay, so what made the difference for us as a team? Really what made the difference is that we used the right data. Assessment for assessment's sake does nothing. We have to be pulling in assessment that we know is going to drive our instruction, right? Just to give a kid a test and not do anything with it, or for having no purpose, really doesn't help anybody. So we use the decoding surveys, we use the pre-reading probes to figure out where on the skills map we needed to start our instruction. We provided small group targeted instruction for Brandon in the classroom. So he didn't feel like he was being pulled out of the class, that he was special, that he was different. He got that right in the classroom alongside his peers. And we continued to target that based on weaknesses until he filled in his gaps. Because if we have that strong foundation for decoding, phonology, and orthography, letter names, letter sounds, he can then apply that to printed text. So Brandon is really my catalyst for change as a teacher. I went to SUNY Stony Brook many, many years ago. I went to Dowling College, that's now out of business on Long Island. Still paying for my master's degree, by the way, every month. I did not get this training. And I work with teachers now in my position, brand new teachers out of college that are saying they don't know what to do. They're not getting the training that they need. And Maria's group, I'm just going to say it again, this is huge, and I hope that it takes off across the county, the country. To have a group of professors really on target with this, trying to change literacy instruction for our pre-service students coming into our schools is just great. So I thank you. All right, so we needed to, I told you that we brought in some trainers. We brought in Linda and Michael to do training for us. And this is not an infomercial for them. I'm just telling you my story, okay? And we needed training, not only me, but the teachers that I worked with in my building. So we needed to learn some of these, the research behind reading. And I know Michael went over, how many of you were in Michael's session before? Okay, about half. So I'll go through the simple view quickly. But we needed to understand this and how to help teachers identify students' strengths and weaknesses and then provide reading skill instruction. So I'm going to walk you through where we began. So when our training first started, we started with learning about the simple view of reading and Scarborough's rote model and what this meant for change along the way. So the simple view of reading is simply a formula. And I'm not going to go into a ton of detail on this. But it's based on a study done by Goff and Tumner in 1986. And what it simply says is it's a multiplication formula that says decoding times language comprehension equals reading comprehension. And it means that if we have a decoding score and a language comprehension score, we can predict reading comprehension. And because it's a multiplication problem, if one of them is weak, the reading comprehension score is weak. Okay? And for those of you that are mathematically inclined, you know what that means. But what this study did is, first of all, this study has been replicated over and over and over again to have high correlations to predict reading comprehension scores. 0.84 in first grade to 0.91 in third and fourth grades. And like I said, it's been replicated. And what this study does is it divides reading difficulties into 3 categories. What we ask as teachers is it a decoding problem, is it a language comprehension problem, or is it both? So I'm just going to go back here for one moment. So decoding has everything to do with this skills map down at the bottom, this phonics and the pre-reading skills at the top. Okay, that's what the decoding side of things. Language comprehension is your ability to understand language. So if I read aloud a book to a kindergartner and ask them questions orally, that's language comprehension. Okay, so language comprehension is everything done orally, not in print. Reading comprehension are like our state reading assessments, those scores, or your benchmark assessments that you might give to kids, where they read a passage and they answer questions about it. Does that make sense? So if either one of those scores is low, decoding or language comprehension, it will impact the reading comprehension score. So in order for students to be strong in reading comprehension, they have to have strong scores in decoding and language comprehension, because it's a multiplication formula. And what does this mean for assessment? Well, a reading comprehension score does not provide enough information to know whether the issue is decoding or language. I could have a child fail a reading comprehension test that I give them, and I don't know whether they didn't understand the language on the test or they couldn't read it, unless I have them read it aloud to me, right? And if they can't read it aloud to me, then I know there's probably a decoding problem. So I worked in middle school for several years, and I would see that happen in middle school. Teachers would give kids science assessments, they would fail them miserably. And I would call the child into my office and I would say, read the test to me. Couldn't read it. Then I would read the test to them. Didn't know the words. So that's a child who's falling apart in both areas. But if the teacher didn't ask me to take a look at the child, we wouldn't know what the issue is. Now, the problem is these kids are in middle school, and we know by research that in order to close the gap for a kid in middle school, they need 3 hours of reading instruction a day. That's too late. It is so important to catch these kids and make sure we have readers by the end of 2nd grade. So basically, we need to assess to see whether it's language, decoding, or both. And that's what we did for Brandon. So again, these are our questions that we focus on. And anytime we hold a pupil services team or an SS team in a school base, we ask these questions first before we go any further. Once we have the answer to that, then we can dig deeper. So this is where Hollis Scarborough's rope model from 2001, so remember, Goff and Tumner was 1986. This is 2001, and what she does here is she takes language comprehension and divides it into 5 strands: background knowledge, vocabulary, language structures, verbal reasoning, literacy knowledge, and word recognition, 3 strands: phonological awareness, decoding, and sight word recognition. So that's this skills map right here that you have a colored copy of. When these 2 strands, major strands, are strong, we have skilled readers. We have readers that can read independently on their own. If any one of these strands is weak, it will weaken the entire rope, right? So that's why I love this graphic. I think that it's a really powerful one to look at, and it helps us to dig a little bit deeper. I saw some people taking pictures, so I'll just wait a second. Okay. All right. So what we want to know, and what we know from the rope model, is that word recognition and language comprehension skills are different, right? And you could see that in that rope. And we want to make sure that we hit these word recognition skills between kindergarten and 2nd grade. And if you have a preschool program or a pre-K program, we want to start with that oral language and oral language concepts early on. Really, really important. And then we have language comprehension, which improves largely through oral instruction when students are learning to decode. So in other words, when they can't read on their own, we need to be doing read-alouds with them. Very important. Read-alouds, picture books, big books, huge. And it doesn't stop in 2nd grade. Middle school kids should be read to as well using picture books. It's important. It develops their vocabulary, the understanding of historical and scientific concepts. Really, really important. But when kids are decoders, their reading comprehension and their language comprehension will improve by them continuing to read, because then they can access that text on their own. So again, we already talked about this, but if any single strand is weak, it will affect the entire ability for a child to comprehend. Any person of any age, and John, I don't know if you just walked in on purpose, but John is a prime example. Any person of any age can be missing any of those skills, right? And it's our job as educators to make sure that that doesn't happen. We can't let these kids slip through the cracks. The other thing is we need to make sure that these skills are taught to automaticity. Automaticity meaning that they do it without thinking, that it's accurate and performed with a reasonable rate. It's one thing to be given a decodable text and have a student read the sentence, "The cat hid in a box," or "The cat hid," right? Okay, that's accurate, but that's not with a reasonable rate. That's not automatic. So we need to work on both, and that's why we focus on accuracy first, rate second, and we don't forget about the two of them working in conjunction with one another. Okay, so that was really the training that we started with, understanding the simple view of reading and the rote model and what that meant for us as teachers. So now we're like, great, okay, so we know that all these things need to work in conjunction. How do we teach these things, right? Because we're not quite sure. So we started with the assessments. We gave the pre-reading probe and the beginning decoding survey to pinpoint our prescription for students like Brandon. We looked at letter name and sound identification. We looked at fixing confusions with B's and D's. And what I want to tell you guys about this, and this drives me crazy. I just had a brand new teacher that I met with before I left. And she said, "Oh, yeah, I know BD. We just do this." Okay. Well, how's a kid supposed to know which one's the B and which one's the D, right? So I said, no. So what I do and what I learned from Michael Linda is just one hand, left hand, and you can put like a rubber band on their hand if they don't know their left hand, hitchhiker. And when they're reading letters, when you have them mixed up B's and D's and E's, and when they see this on the page, it's a B. It's a B, it's a B, or it's a B. When you get BD fixed, then you just turn your hitchhiker thumbs down, and it's a P, it's a P, it's a P, left hand, right? So we want to make sure that we're not confusing kids and compromising the situation even further. So, and that's an easy thing to teach kids to do, and I will tell you that I had a young man named Willie who came to me in 3rd grade not knowing any of his letter names or letter sounds. He was new to the district a few years ago. And so we worked on just recognizing one letter at a time, and he had BD reversals. I'm pretty sure he was dyslexic, although not diagnosed. And then we want to look at phonological awareness and make sure that to super mastery that we have kids are able to manipulate phonemes. So here's some bad things that we did. So you don't want to be doing these, right? So this is before we learned what to do. We used to teach letter names and letter sounds together. And for struggling readers, trying to learn both at the same time causes cognitive memory overload, right? That's not a good idea. And the other thing is we had kids practice the same skills, everybody, whether you knew it or you didn't know it. So the kids who knew it are bored, and the kids who didn't know it are overloaded. So we had some bad instruction going on. What we did after, and what you all can do is if you're teaching letter names, is you can give each student in a small group, they'll have their own index cards. 6 cards of letters that they know, if they know 6 letters. If they don't know, give them the ones that they know. And 6 index cards of one new letter that the student is learning, whether it's uppercase or lowercase. And every student, so if you all are my group, and this would be too large, but 3 to 4 students, and you would get your set of index cards, you'd get your set of index cards, and so on and so forth. They practice 3 times during a session. So that could go very, very quickly, right? This is not a long period of time. When the student knows the cards perfectly 2 days in a row, you put a new letter in and move the letter just learned to one of the 6 index cards. Because it's still fresh in their mind, we want to make sure that they know it and continue to know it. Now, what do the other kids do while you're working with one student? Well, if you place that student strategically in between the other students, they could be looking on and they could give a thumbs up if they have them all right, or a helping hand if they need help, if they've made a mistake. This way, everybody is accountable. They're still looking at the letters, and even if they don't know what's in that set, they're exposed to some things. Does that make sense? So this is just another example down here. So again, you give them 1 card of each of the letters that the child knows, and then 6 of a new letter. Now, you could do this with letter names, and you could do it with letter sounds. So you could do it both ways. And it doesn't matter how your group is set up, but as long as you are differentiating instruction based on what they need to learn. The other thing, and you have a copy of this, blank copy of this in your handout, not with the letters on it, but you could create letter practice pages in small groups. So up here we have Sarah, and she is working on naming the letters. Deshaun is working on the sounds that the letters make, and Xavier is learning the names. So if you look at this, what do you think that Sarah's working on? What letter? G. Yeah. And how about Deshaun? C. And he's working on the sounds, so what is he going to say? Right. Now, I know C says S, but we're going to master its main sound first, right? And what about Xavier? H, right? And the other students can follow along. So the teacher could mark it, and the students would each have a copy of what all the students are working, so they could mark it as well. They become the checkers. And so they become like mini student teachers involved in the lesson with the other students. And I just did this with you. All right. So some tips that we learned for teaching letters. We are first going to start with uppercase names. And this is to avoid BD reversals, PQ reversals, and for anybody that uses the Handwriting Without Tears program for handwriting, they follow the same sequence. They teach all uppercase handwriting letters first, starting in kindergarten. Then we move into lowercase letters, and then we work the sounds, because a lot of the sounds also follow the names of the letters. So once they know the names of the letters, the sounds will come much more easily. So we also made some big errors in phonological awareness instruction. We didn't pay attention to it. We just went right to phonics. We didn't pay attention to the sounds. We didn't pay attention to syllables. We didn't pay attention to onset rhyme. And so we found that some readers will acquire reading with no problem, but many of our students did not and cannot. And so we needed to learn how to go back and teach these pre-reading skills, systematically, explicitly, multisensory. Okay. So I want to show you, there's a book out by, I'm going to forget the authors, but it's called Who's Doing the Work? And I don't like everything in the book, but what I do like about the book is that it talks about the teachers doing most of the work for the kids. Like, we do a lot of the work for the kids. The kids need to be doing the work, right? And so by having a routine, by having a script to follow and setting up routines, forces us as teachers to basically shut up and let the kids do the work. So you have a handout, and I am grateful that Readsters let us use these routines today. I also have, if you're interested, that I just gave to my staff, routine cards for spelling and reading multisyllabic words and spelling chaining. So if you want those, just email me. I put them on cardstock for the teachers on rings so they could just flip through what the routine is that they want. So if you want that, just shoot me an email and I'll send it to you in a Word document. So I want you to just, I'm going to give you a minute to take a look at what's in this packet, and I'm going to call you back and I'm going to go through parts of it with you. So just take a minute to look at what's in the packet, and then I'm going to call you back and we'll go through it together. In this packet, you have graphics for phonology skills. You have checklists, routines, sample word lists, and this is all around phonological awareness, okay? So what I had said, somebody just asked, is for the routines for when you attach letters to it. So if you want some of those routines, I have those typed up. I can send those to you. But they are based off of what I've learned from Readsters. So I'm going to walk you through this. So I want you to find section 3 on the front cover of your packet. It says Phonological Awareness. And locate the routines and word lists for teaching onset rhymes. So you're going to be looking at pages 11, 12, 13, and 16. So let's start on page 11 first. So I can't tell you how many times I go in to coach a teacher, and this happened to me as well, I want you to know, but where the teacher doesn't give the kid enough wait time and they just want to give them the word or give them the answer, right? Following a routine will stop you from doing that work for the child, because if they never experience trying to go through the task that you're asking them, they won't master it, right? It's like tying your shoe. Oh, you're taking too long, I'll do it for you. Like, they have to struggle through some things to get there. So I'm going to walk you through what this might sound like on page 11. So we have it set up as an I do, we do, you do. So all of the kids would have index cards or pieces of index cards, 2 pieces of index cards. And so this is what the teacher would say. We will blend 2 parts to make a word. Watch me. So in front of me, I'm going to have, the parts are ach. So I would go, place the on one half. This is all sound, not letters. Ach, match, and I would slide my fingers. So then I would give the students 2 halves of index cards. You could use colored cubes, you could use felts, you could use magnets. It doesn't matter as long as there are no letters or printed on anything. Do it with me. S, op. You guys try that. Just pretend like you have 2. So s, op. Everyone repeat. Well, you were supposed to go s-op, right? And then everyone blend. Okay? So the reason for that is you want them to repeat what you're saying and then put it together so that they have to do the work, right? All right, so then we would do individual turns. So I might say to you, the first part is fool. The second part is ip. Everyone, oh, sorry, I'm going to do everyone. Everyone, say the sounds as you put out the cards. So touch and blend, touch the sound. So fool, ip, okay? Touch and blend. So do it one more. So I'm going to have you do it this time. Touch and blend. Okay, good, and you blended. So everyone now, fool, okay. And you want the teacher to be quiet. So on your script, the S stands for a single student, and the SS stands for everybody doing it together. You could have several students do it on their own. So I could say, you touch and say, you touch and say, you touch and say, everybody touch and say. So if I'm concerned about a student not knowing if they know the skill and they're going to wait that nanosecond for their partner over here to respond, you can have individual students do it and then everybody do it. Does that make sense? Okay. So then you have some additional routines here on page 12 for teaching onset rhyme completion. So let me give you a minute to look at that routine to make sure that makes sense to you. Okay, so does that kind of make sense? The script is really helpful, and it's okay to read from a script. And once you establish the routine, the kids will know automatically what you're doing. You won't have to give so many directions. They know automatically what you're doing. Okay, and then they're just practicing the skill. So we changed some things for phonics as well. So we were still learning. One of the sessions this morning was about, the spelling patterns, and so we needed to learn why things were spelled certain ways. All of us didn't know that. We weren't trained for it coming out of our college program. So we used Phonics Boost, some of the lessons from Phonics Boost to teach phonics patterns. We continued to use phonics plugins for our severely low students. But the bottom line is that our teachers began to get trained in how to teach phonological awareness and phonics using a systematic, explicit, multisensory approach, basically structured literacy. That's what we were using. So I want to take you through a couple of case studies so we can practice some of this in kind of figuring out where you might start for these students. All right, so here's scenario one. You don't have the answers in your packets. So we have a second grader. And I want you to think about the simple view of reading to answer these questions. So decoding times language comprehension equals reading comprehension. This student has low reading comprehension scores on the school reading assessments. And the student is able to answer comprehension questions, including questions that require inference when listening to a story in class. Okay, so does everybody have that? All right, here comes your question. Do you suspect a weakness with decoding or language comprehension? Smart. Okay, decoding. What's the evidence? He can do it orally, yep. So the student understands oral language, but is struggling when they're reading independently. So what do you want to do? What kind of an assessment? Based on what I gave you today. I mean, you may have your own, but based on what I said to you today. Do we go to the letters and sounds first? Yes, beginning decoding survey. We got it. We worked together as a team on that one. So beginning decoding survey, because we want to see in that first grade band if they can read single syllable words with short vowels. We want to see what they're able to do first. Before we go all the way back to phonology, we want to see where their weaknesses are in decoding, right? That first layer. Plus, he's in second grade. So we hope, not always the case, that they have their letter names and letter sounds, but don't ever assume that. And so once we get the beginning decoding survey data, if it's really low or it's all over the place like Brandon, then we're going to want to look at things in phonological awareness, okay? So here's another scenario. So we have a third grader who demonstrates strong oral comprehension when the child's read aloud to in class. The child scored a 20 out of 50 on the beginning decoding survey. Remember that the expectation by the end of first grade is 48 out of 50. The child reads most words sound by sound with correct letter sounds, but then reads the words incorrectly. For example, the child will say k-a-p, pot. What assessment will you give? Do you want to take a minute to turn and talk? Yep, pre-reading. Why? Yeah, they're not able, what isn't this child able to do? Blend, right? So we want to see where they're falling apart. Why does it say pre-reading probe there, and then it says low score on BDS? Oh, low score on BDS. Sorry. Got confused. Okay, so also I would say, you could say because of the low score on the BDS, but I would be more alarmed at the fact that the child can't blend, and that's why the score on the BDS is so low. Does that make sense? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
So we have the kids too that have the ADHD.
Yeah.
They can't remember, oh, I did it, they get lost.
Yeah.
So then that's just another issue.
Yes, it is. So a lot of times with kids who have attention deficit disorder, I find that if you pull them out in an area where there's no distractions to really get a sense of what they know and don't know, so a room with nothing on it, you know, really quiet, just to see, because sometimes it's a distraction issue, that they're just getting lost in everything going on in the room and they just can't attend, versus that they don't really know. So you want to tease that out first, and I think Mark Seidenberg talked about that this morning, where lots of these issues are compounded with other types of spectrum along, you know, the continuum of everything. Yeah, but I find that if we pull those kids out and do a one-on-one, just to really see, and even sometimes those kids, and I know it's so hard in a school setting, I know that some of our teachers have 30, 35 kids in a class, that to try and do a one-on-one setting is really difficult. And I hate to say it, but sometimes training a parent the way you want them to do it with a script is not always a bad thing, or having them do something with the rest of the kids while you work with the child for 5 or 10 minutes, that might help too. So we just have to be creative with our manpower sometimes. Yes, ma'am?
Would you say going to the end, like if a student jumps to the end of the letter. Is that a blending problem? Or sometimes students would seem to always get the N sound, but
Oh,
jump to
yeah,
the
they
first
might have
sound.
been holding on to the end sound, but I really think this child can't hold sounds to be able to blend them into a word. They're just making up something. But they could have grabbed that end sound and then created a new word, whatever came to their mind. Absolutely. Okay. So this same third grader, we wound up giving the pre-reading probe, and this is what happened for the child. So that, just to let you know, the green is good and the red is not so good. So green, the child can blend oral syllables into a word, but the child struggles with blending oral onset rhyme and 2 and 3 sound oral sounds into a word. In terms of orthography, good news for this child, they know all their upper and lower case letter names and sounds, but they only know 2 digraphs, and they know all 10 of those basic high-frequency words, irregularly spelled high-frequency words. So for this child, is the main problem, if we were to look at that reading skills map, is the main problem orthographic having to do with the letters or phonological having to do with sounds? Yep, phonological. So what's the evidence here? Can't blend. Yep, they know their upper and lower case letters. So they can't blend onset rhyme. They can't blend 2 and 3 sounds, but they know all their letters and their high-frequency words. So can you see here how we can use data, this to be diagnostic, and then work on where to start our instruction? So where do we start instruction? Where would you start? Blending what? Onset rhyme, right? Because onset rhyme is a simpler skill than phonemes, right? It's a larger chunk of the word. The interesting thing, if you think about this, when you're doing phonological awareness, we start with large chunks of words like syllables and then work down to the individual sound. But when we spell, we work on the sound to go to syllables, right? Because we work on single-syllable words, so we can work on individual sounds before we get into multisyllabic words, where we're working on larger chunks. So it's almost like the triangle goes in opposite directions. Okay, last scenario, I think. This kindergartner comes to school in February not knowing how to write his name, first or last. And we give the pre-reading probe and we learn, or an assessment to know what's going on with phonological awareness, and we learn that the student knows uppercase letters T, X, O, A, Z, and S, and the lowercase letter X. No letter sounds. How do we begin instruction for letter names and sounds? Where do we start? Who wants to share? Uppercase. Do we do all the letters? One at a time.
Do it again with the index cards and then the extra set of whatever. Yes.
Yep. Start with the index cards and then go to the where all the letters are on the page with more of the letter that the child doesn't know. You may want to start at this point in kindergarten with the letters in the child's name, so they learn how to spell their name first, right? So you may want to work on something like that, because that's an important skill for any kindergartner, to know how to spell their name. Okay, and we do it to mastery. Whoop. What's going on here? Well, hold on. All right. Ay, vey. Okay, is this, okay. All right, so as we wrap up our conversation today, there's one graphic that I did not share with you. And this is on the back of your colored copy of your skills map. And it looks like this. I want to tell you where this came from. Mississippi, the state of Mississippi, has started a new initiative called the Barksdale Reading Institute. That's my 15-minute warning. Sorry. The Barksdale Reading Institute. Jim Barksdale dumped $100 million into helping literacy across the state of Mississippi. And this organization has put out this graphic, which I absolutely love. It's called the Reading Universe Chart. And basically, it's everything that goes into our reading universe. From the simple view of reading, decoding times language equals comprehension, right? making sure that we're doing ongoing assessment, universal screening, benchmark, diagnostic, progress monitoring, formative and summative assessment, how our instruction should be structured, sequential, systematic, explicit, to mastery and cumulative, including writing, and all of the concepts that go into being a literate adult, including concepts of print, knowing how to hold a book, knowing how to turn the pages, where the title is. And so I just love this. This is one more tool that I use with teachers and parents to talk about things that might be missing or things to look at in instruction. So I just find all 4 of these graphics that I shared with you today, the simple view, the rote model, Readster's reading skills map for decoding, and this graphic really helpful for me as an instructor and as a teacher. Before we do this, I just want to show you at the back of your handout, you have some resources for more information. If you're interested in anything having to do with the pre-reading probe, information on the simple view of reading, you can go to readsters.com, and under resources, you'll find articles and the assessment for the pre-reading probe for free. In terms of screeners, Dibble's Next is also free. The Diagnostic Decoding Survey is free, and there's the website rgrco.com for realllygreatreading.com. I would only take a look at this. They have lots of materials, but I would stick with this. Yes, Michael.
Because I love the reading league so much, guys, pre-reading probes, the version that's on the website is an older version. But for you guys in this room only, you will email me, michael@readsters.com, or just go to readsters.com, email.readsters.com. We have a newer version that I'm not sharing on the website. We're going to publish it eventually, but you guys can have it for free. So I want you to have the best one.
Thank you, Michael. Say that again. He's talking about this, the pre-reading probe. This diagnostic decoding survey is the one where they read words in isolation. That's for decoding. And that is, version A is free, and the directions are online. It's for free. All you have to do is put your email in so they know who they're giving it to. Okay? So all this stuff is free. It was just too expensive for me to copy everything, so I hope you guys understand. And then these are some of the other programs that we used and materials that we used when we were working with kids like Brandon. Just some references and sources. And so we have about 10 minutes left. I just want you to take a minute, if you'll turn and talk to a colleague or a neighbor at your table, and talk about, what students come to mind, what did you get from this presentation that you can implement, what changes might you make as you move forward, and then I'll just ask a couple of you to share out at the very end. Okay, sorry. All right, so can I just ask a couple of you to share some things? Woo. What am I doing wrong? Am I moving around too much? Anybody want to share something they're walking away with today? We have Mr. Corcoran in the room, so I'm sure he wants to know how we're going to help students who struggled like he did. Only he went unnoticed for almost 40 years, right? So we don't want that to happen. Anybody want to share anything? No one? You're tired? It's Friday? Yes, ma'am.
Just at the primary level, I'm a first grade teacher.
Okay, hold on. See, let's hope.
It'll probably do it.
Okay.
Just at the primary level, I'm a first grade teacher, and we do a lot of the phonemic awareness activities. And like you were saying, just using blocks or animals, we'll sometimes pull stuffed animals in. So you'll say full app, okay, say the sounds, and they omit one. Wait, you forgot about this animal right here. It's just a good visual connection, and the kids are really excited. And again, you're just bringing fun into the activity.
That's a great. I got your attention now. That's a great suggestion. Thanks. Was that why? Thank you. Okay, go ahead. Anybody else have something they want to share? One more person, please. One more. Wait time. Okay, thank you. I don't think it's on. Can you shout your teacher voice?
I can. So what I'm interested in is using the pre-decoder survey because oftentimes I just use one to find out what their letters and sounds are,
Yeah.
basic things, but I don't think I've ever actually used a pre-decoder
Yeah,
survey. So I'm very interested in trying that out. I have very specific students that I have in mind. So
that's great. One of the things I want to tell you about the pre-reading probe, not only does it look at the skills that I talked to you about today, but it also has an optional assessment on it that has kids write their upper and lowercase letters under a time situation. So they get 2 minutes to write the uppercase letters. There's boxes on there from A to Z without a visual in front of them. And let me tell you, we started doing this in my school system this year through 2nd grade. Teachers are appalled that kids can't get through A to Z in 2 minutes. This could attribute, and I don't have any data to back this up, but it could attribute to kids with their writing fluency in 2nd grade having difficulty pulling letters without a visual from their mind onto paper and then trying to spell it. Again, we're talking about cognitive overload. So there's an optional assessment on there having to do with printing letters as well, which is really an important aspect. I know it comes after kindergarten, but it is something we need to pay attention to. Just like counting forward and backward, we need to know our alphabet starting at different points. You know, what are the next 3 letters after the letter B? What's the next 3 letters after F? And being able to write them and identify them. Very important skill. So I want to thank you all. This is great. I'm honored to be here with you today, and I hope you're walking away with something that you can use. So thank you for everything you do.